Okay, so next up is atmospheric perspective. This is a little different than linear perspective, but it's another thing that artists use to create depth in a 2D piece. So with atmospheric perspective, the illusion of depth is produced by changing color and detail. This mimics real life because faraway objects become less clear and their coloring is a lot duller, and actually more blue is added the further away it gets. And moisture and dust in the air actually cause this to happen in real life. So we'll take a look at a piece that uses atmospheric perspective. So Asher Brown Durand, Kindred Spirits, 1849, oil and canvas, 44 by 36 inches. And he used atmospheric perspective in this painting to provide a sense of the vast distances in the North American wilderness. The trees and branches in the foreground have a lot more detail than some of the trees in the background here. And as you move through the painting, you start to lose detail, and the background colors become much more muted and more blue is added in, and eventually you come to this light blue mountain shape back here with really no detail in it at all. So he's using atmospheric perspective here, which helps to create depth and make it look pretty realistic, actually. So time and motion is another, element of art here. And it's basically events that occur in succession. Although time itself is invisible, it can be made perceptible in art. So the passage of time, non-Western cultures believe that time is cyclical. So the Aztecs believe that time worked in a circle, whereas a lot of the Western cultures believe that time is linear. And so we'll look at a couple different pieces that use time as their theme, basically. So this is a Aztec stone calendar from 1479, quite large, 141 inches in diameter. And it's from Mexico, obviously. So the Aztecs of ancient Mexico held the belief that the earth was subject to cycles of destruction and recreation. And this stone calendar really embodies that idea. At the center of the Aztec calendar is the face of the sun god. And he's surrounded by 4 compartments that each represent one of the previous incarnations of the world. So I think maybe this compartment here, this compartment here, this compartment, or maybe here, 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 and here. I'm not quite sure exactly where these 4 compartments are, but basically they represent the different incarnations of the world. And the stone is round, symbolizing the cyclical nature of time. So this is more of a Western painting. It's done by Sacetta. It's the meeting of St. Anthony and St. Paul from 1440. And the medium is tempera paint on panel. So the Christian tradition of Western culture teaches that time is linear and continuously moving forward. The 15th century painter Sacetta implied the passage of time in this painting, the meeting of St. Anthony and St. Paul. The painting depicts key moments during St. Anthony's progression through time and space. So at the start of his journey, it takes place at the top center. I believe this is the city. You can kind of see it. There's a little bit of an outline of a building here. And he comes to view as he walks through the wilderness on the upper left. And then he keeps going and he meets a centaur here. So this is a half horse or goat, half man. I can't remember if it's a horse or a goat. And then finally he emerges in the clearing in the foreground where he actually meets, so he came through here, he meets St. Paul. So the road on which he travels implies continuous forward movement in time. And this is more of a Western ideal that time is continuously moving forward in a linear way. So comic books also do a pretty good job of showing the progression of time, or the concept of time. And we read the frames from top to bottom and left to right. And in this comic, the creators control the passage of time through subtle movements of the character in the panels. And so it's a sequence where the character returns to her office and the background changes and the colors of the buildings change as Abbott, the main character, walks down the street. And these images are overlaid with similar panels of Abbott smoking a cigarette. And this kind of gives the impression that she's moving quickly. And you can see even the way that her cigarette kind of goes down, starts off, she's lighting it here, she's smoking it, and it's almost gone here. But her walking speed and an impression of passing time has been achieved through the sequence of images, and it has been done without the use of text. So here she goes, she's lighting her cigarette, she's still smoking, and here she comes into her place of work, I believe. So there's implied motion in a lot of pieces. So we're going to talk about motion now. Dancing Krishna. It portrays a Hindu god as a playful child. So we'll take a look at that. By Tamil Nadu from South India. 1300. It's made out of bronze. It's fairly large, 23 inches tall, roughly. And it is an appealing depiction of movement. It portrays the Hindu god as a playful child who just stole his mother's butter supply and now dances with glee. The bronze medium does provide the necessary strength to hold this dynamic pose that he's in. So the fact that he has his leg up off the ground, his arms are open, which is an open form, kind of suggests that he is in movement, right? The way that they are presenting this piece. So actual motion is also used in works of art. So pieces that actually move. And before the advent of electric motors, artists often created moving sculpture by harnessing the forces of wind and water. So this is a piece by Alexander Calder, and it's a mobile, and it's really does rely on wind for movement, and it moves very slowly in space. And this is an example of kinetic art, which is art that actually moves. And this is called Untitled for 1972. It's fairly large, 358 inches by 911. And they actually have this one indoors. But if it was outside, the wind would be blowing this around. And kinetic art is art that moves. So just remember that. And Alexander Calder is one of the first 20th century artists that actually incorporates actual motion as a major element in or feature in his arts. So I'm going to talk about light a little bit. So seeing light, our eyes are light sensing instruments. Everything we see is made of visible light. Sunlight, natural light, often perceived as white or clear, actually contains all of the colors of light that make up the visible part of the electromagnetic spectrum. Light can be directed, reflected, refracted, diffused, all of those things. The source, color, intensity, direction of light greatly affects the way things appear. Let me check and see how much time we have. Okay, we're still doing good. So seeing light, the way light falls can influences how we see a subject. And value is the relative lightness or darkness of surfaces. So value is kind of its own little term here. So one example of how light can really change the effect of a piece, how we perceive it, is this Lincoln Memorial detail by Daniel Chester French. So he's the one that made the Lincoln Memorial in, I believe, 1911. And this is a photograph of the plaster head. So when it was first installed, the sunlight made Lincoln seem frightened. And the problem was corrected by placing spotlights in the ceiling above the statue, which made him look much more decisive and thoughtful and masculine. And it just goes to show that the way that we light things can really have an influence on how we see them. And value can also be called tone, refers to the relative lightness or darkness of surfaces. Value ranges from white through various grays to black. So we can see this first one here. He looks frightened. This is how it was originally presented, which is sunlight. But they added a spotlight above him in the Lincoln Memorial that helps to light him differently, so he looks more imposing, which is something we actually want in a leader. It implies strength. So okay, so implied light. Subtle relationships between light and dark tones determine how things look. A gradual shift from lighter to darker values can give the illusion of a curving surface, while an abrupt change in value indicates an abrupt change in surface. So here's some dark light relationships. It's a value scale when compared to middle gray. So this scale shows the relationship between value, light and dark, and the uniform middle gray. As you can see, the gray bar has the same gray value over its entire length, yet it appears to change from one end to the other as the value of the background changes. So that's kind of interesting. Okay, so we're going to take a look. So implied light, we're going to look at François Bovin self-portrait. So it's a dark room with only one light source. He's using chiaroscuro. Chiaro means light, oscuro means dark. So he's using a lot of really extreme values, so really light lights and really dark darks. And it creates an illusion that figures have roundness and bulk. So we'll take a look at that. So François Bonvin, sorry, I'm not saying that very well. Self-portrait, 1846 through 47. Fabricated black chalk on scratching, with scratching in it. So it's chalk and scratching. And he's using chiaroscuro here. So he poses in a dark room with only one light source. All the values from light to dark fall on his face. The brightest part is the upper corner of his forehead, up here, where he left no marks on the paper, and the darkest spot is at his ear on the left. Between these two zones, his charcoal strokes grew denser across his forehead and cheek. This technique of shading from light to dark is called chiaroscuro, from the Italian chiaro for light and oscuro for dark. The technique makes it possible to create the illusion of figures and objects depicted on a flat surface have roundness and bulk. Light as an actual medium is used. Light can actually be used as medium, I guess. So a lot of contemporary artists use artificial light as their medium. So Keith Sonnier, Motordom, 2004. This is a light installation in Los Angeles. And Keith Sonnier used these intense colors provided by light when he placed an array of neon tubes on the outdoor lobby of a new government building in Los Angeles. He called the work Motordom. The piece expresses the car culture of Southern California. So Southern Californians are always on the freeway. They're always in their car, getting from one place to another. So that's kind of what this piece symbolizes, is the car culture of Southern California. And the neon tubes slowly flicker in a pattern that mimics taillights. And the agency that commissioned the building operates the state's roads and bridges. So it really makes sense that they put Motordom on this building, because it really is appropriate for the space that it occupies. Okay, so next up we have texture. In the visual arts, texture refers to the tactile qualities of surfaces, or to the visual representation of those qualities. Even as adults, we enjoy touching things. Petting your dog or cat, feeling a smooth surface, is still very enjoyable. And all surfaces have textures that can be experienced through touching or through visual suggestion. Textures can be categorized as either actual or simulated. So actual textures are those that we can feel by touching. And these are used by sculptors and architects. Simulated textures are those that are created to look like something other than what they are created with. So a painter who uses paint to create simulated textures that look like real fur or wood would be a simulated texture.